words in here that take some time to pronounce.
I started the recorder, so you're all set, Dipti.
Okay, great. So I would like to read the oral declaration regarding in-person meetings of the Community Relations Forum of the Village of Glencoe. Pursuant to recently adopted amendments to the Illinois Open Meetings Act included in Public Act 101-0640, public bodies may, in certain circumstances, hold entirely virtual public meetings without a quorum physically present in any one location. On March 19, 2020, President Levine issued a declaration of emergency pursuant to the authority granted by the Village Code, the Illinois Municipal Code, and the Illinois Emergency Management Agency Act to address the health threat posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. On May 29, 2020, Governor Pritzker issued a disaster proclamation that declared in-person attendance at public meetings of more than 10 people at the regular public meeting location to be infeasible in accordance the Open Meetings Act as amended by Public Act 101-0640. In accordance with the governor's disaster proclamation and the village president's declaration of emergency, I, as chair of the Community Relations Forum, hereby determine that in-person meetings of the Community Relations Forum are not practical or prudent at this time and until further notice. I would like to call the meeting to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Chair Dipti Clark.
Here.
Member Marty Alisco. Margot Flanagan.
Here.
Member Reverend Dwayne Gary.
Here.
Member Gary Rubin.
Yes.
Member Maureen Valvasori.
Here.
And Member Bob Young.
Present.
All right, we have a quorum. And I'm physically present at the Village Hall. I should note that for the record.
Thank you, Sharon. So the first item on the agenda is consideration of our I can't remember the date, July
22nd.
July 22nd meeting, meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
If I may, Dipti, I would just ask that that motion include a correction of a Scrivener's error. My placeholder for adding the start time of the meeting of 5 o'clock did not get filled in. So I would just ask for the motion to include correction of that Scrivener's error.
Okay. Do we have a motion to include the correction?
Sure. So moved.
Second.
Right.
Excellent. May I have a roll call vote?
Chairperson Dipti Clark.
Here.
Is that a yes?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Aye.
Perfect. All good. Member Margot Flanagan.
Yep.
Member Reverend Dwayne Gary.
Aye.
Member Gary Rubin.
Yes.
And Member Maureen Valvasori.
Yes.
And Member Bob Young.
Yes.
Tripped over my words there. Apologies.
This is the time in the meeting when a member of the public may comment on something that is not on the agenda. I will ask Sharon to read any public comments that were submitted prior to the meeting. After that, I will ask if any members of the public would like to comment on something that is not on the agenda. If you would like to make a comment about something that is on the agenda, please hold your comments until that time. If a member of the public would like to make a comment now on something that is not on the agenda, please press the raise hand button on your computer if you're joining the meeting online, or *9 if you're joining by phone. The village's public comment rules limit comments to 3 minutes.
There were no comments submitted in advance of the meeting. And I do not see any hands raised right now.
Okay, perfect. Then we can move on to our next item on the agenda. I wanted to talk about our forum members have been reaching out to some of our chalkers in downtown Glencoe. A few of us actually, as we've seen them, just to talk to them, introduce ourselves, maybe understand their perspective, and just be present, actively listening, and take it further. Maybe have them on our forum meetings, introduce them to other members of the community, understand how we can learn, grow, help, and be a part of that process. So I just wanted to let everyone know that we've heard of a few, and also want to give really in a very positive way. We had some business owners who have taken the initiative to be that ally, to also reach out and introduce them to us, the forum, so we can then take that conversation forward. So, definitely wanted to highlight that as well. Anybody wants to add to that?
I would add that we did hear that even some of the restaurant owners had sent meals to the chalkers. So that was a very nice thing to hear.
Yeah, definitely very positive, very community oriented. And it's always nice to see that. So thank you, Maureen, for bringing that up. So we have invited one of our chalkers. He reached out to us, and he has said that he would join our meeting today. So he I don't know if he has joined, but he probably would. And when we have time for public comments, he's welcome to speak, which would be a really nice way of starting some dialogue. And as we move forward through our meetings, we want to understand and learn from him on how we as a community can help and do better, and what we can do, So those are kind of some of the things that would be really good to know. We'll also maybe hear from Michael from Writers Theater, because last time he had some comments, so I would definitely like to reach out and see if he has more to share from his perspective as well. So that's all I had really on the chalking thing. Anything else anybody wants to talk about this, or we can move forward to the next item?
Dipti, I do see a hand raised. I don't know if that's Olivier. Would you like to take that comment now or at the end?
Sure. I mean, can we take the comment now? I mean,
Up to you.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, since we're on the topic, I don't know. Is Olivier?
I'm going to unmute that line. Okay. Libby, you're unmuted. Oh, there you go. You're unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, it is
Hi,
Olivier.
Yep.
Yeah, I just didn't know how I could join this call, so I was like, okay, I guess I'll just follow along and maybe I can comment, jump in. Yeah, the restaurant owners have been pretty cool. I don't think I've really had any problems with them, mostly just the civilians. But yeah, I've had a pretty positive response. I'm hoping that, we can kind of talk about like some of the problems going on in the North Shore and how we can sort of identify them and, kind of fix them. And hopefully that we can start giving aid to other areas as well.
So Olivier, I just want to, like, for the purpose of the group here, just want to introduce you that you were one of our prominent chalkers.
I am, yeah, sorry.
Downtown Glencoe. And so it's just so everyone has a bit of a background. And maybe if you want to just give a little more introduction about yourself, that would kind of help our group.
Sure. Okay, so I'm Olivier. I grew up in the North Shore. I kind of like bounce between, towns and whatnot, but, it kind of starts out as me kind of living in Evanston, and this is where I was born. because my parents, they'd come from Haiti and they'd traveled all over, but they'd settled down in Chicago. So now I'm coming in. I'm having, these like strange life experiences that, they kind of never really taught me about. But these were things that I was very, very much aware of. So it started a lot before I was 14, but the biggest thing that happened to me when I was 14 was my first incident with police brutality. And this was when I was at Highland Park High School selling car wash tickets, and just in my neighborhood. And I had just a few officers that had pulled up to me, and apparently I wasn't allowed to sell, and that was something that I didn't know, but I'd also never heard of not being able to sell from your own school. So they pulled up to me, they got out of their car, they drew weapons on me, and they said that you're not allowed to be here. You have to have some sort of permit. We need your identification, and which I didn't have on me because I was only just a few hundred feet from my house. So after that, I just decided to stop selling and just started walking home, to which they followed me at my own pace. So as you can imagine, they were kind of, lined up like ducks in a row. And I just walked right up my driveway and just sat in the house up until they left. And that was just kind of the first incident. But throughout high school, I had dealt with a lot of racism, either from Highland Park or Deerfield or New Trier or Northfield or, kind of like in these surrounding areas. But I had gone to, but before all that, it was kind of me mostly living my educational life at North Shore Country Day, which is in Winnetka. And there were just a ton of problems there in and of themselves. Like, for one, it was not very diverse, either in staffing or, student bodies or families or anything like that. So a lot of my experiences were of being surrounded a lot by white people. And growing up, I hadn't really understood the social contract that was really going on. I mean, I understood it, but not to the extent that I did now. It was like, so when children are young, it's all of these differences that people are able to, or that they're able to, differentiate between, people, whether it be by skin color, body size, or, anything like that. And it was just like, I hadn't really understood racism the way I understood it now. So kind of fast forwarding to now, after living all these experiences and kind of just living through this uprising, I've been trying to do a lot of work in the North Shore to try and make it safer for Black people to live in the area. Because it's not just the police that are attacking Black people, it is also the civilians too. And a lot of people don't really understand that there are a lot of incidents, I would say, that don't just happen like weekly or monthly, but pretty much daily. So for example, with the chalking in Glencoe, when I was out there, I would, kind of just spend a couple of hours chalking, not necessarily partially to get the message out, but also as sort of an experiment to see like how hot the area was with, how they would react. And the first couple of days, I didn't get a great reaction. In fact, I had a lot of people threatening to call the police on me or calling the police on me or just video recording me, or trying to write, counter messages and, to be negative about it. So I guess I got your attention and everybody else's attention too. And now I kind of ended up here. But I guess what I'm trying to do is, kind of connect different bodies of the North Shore so that more problems can be identified and more problems can be tackled together, whether it be in the education sector or the the civilian employment sector, or just being able to, walk in the neighborhood. Because I often find that I can't walk in the neighborhood without either being stalked by the police, other civilians. I've even tried to get a FOID card because it's gotten so unsafe, and I've been stalked through my car as well. Like about, I think in January, I was stalked by a couple in a Mercedes of some kind, like some kind of truck, and they had followed me for what seemed like miles. And the only way that I figured out that they were actually really stalking me was, I would make turns or like, three-point turns in driveways, and they would just follow me in the same direction, same area, and they didn't really stop them until, I went back home, to which case they began circling my house for a while and then left.
So this was from Glencoe, Olivia?
This was in Glencoe, January. There was one in Winnetka, I think that was in March. But there have been like a lot of incidents, and that was just with me. I mean, the other, residents that like kind of live along the North Shore or in Glencoe have like different stories of, whether it be their coworkers or working in the schools or even working in some of the as village workers. I mean, I've had some of them come up to me, say, thank you for doing this, because sometimes we're a little afraid to come out here. And I've even got people who used to live here that just moved out because they simply didn't feel safe. And oftentimes whenever I would or whenever I posted the videos of like some of the incidents that had happened online, people would ask me, hey, like, where is this? And I'm like, oh, this is Glencoe. And they're like, yeah, we don't really go there, because it's typically not a safe place for us to be, or like any part of the North Shore, really.
So when you say safe, I'm just trying to understand as a community, how can we help? Like, help us understand when you say safe.
So, okay, so when it comes to safety, a lot of it needs to, like, for example, when it comes to calling the police on people, I think we've pretty much seen a lot of what goes on in the United States and why people call the police on, people who are kind of just minding their own business or just, not doing anything. It's really an attempt to execute or remove or arrest or like bring bodily harm, because nobody really calls the police on somebody who's, sitting on a bench or just chalking because they actually felt threatened for their life, or they felt like, like like there was an actual crime being committed. They're calling the police because they want that person harmed, they want that person dealt with. And that's basically been the trend that has happened in America, and it's one that's very prevalent in Glencoe, Highland Park, Deerfield, Northfield, Evanston, these types of areas. And the North Shore being like a strip of sundown towns, this is it only adds to the history being ever so present in how people act towards Black and Brown Indigenous people. So it's because of people. It's because of some of the residents calling the police, or stalking people of color, or it's the presence of the threat that is always following us, either to our jobs or to our houses, with our kids at the park. What we can do is we need to really identify the people or the kinds of people that do this stuff, and either talk with them about why they do it, or I think that we need to really start identifying them, just so, because I'm not usually one to say, hey, let's sit down and talk about these guys. But, the village is so small that I'm pretty sure that, these people can be identified and that they need to be talked to, because what they're doing is very dangerous. They're trying to call for a public execution. And I call it a public execution because that's exactly what it is. That's what the pattern is. That's what, people treat it as. You don't call the police on sleeping Black people in their car, or, Black people who are just, listening to music, or just, playing in the park or something. So I guess what I'm asking for is to really, because like if we know who's doing this, and we know who's trying to bring like harm onto the residents, I think that we either need to talk to them, or start campaigning against them somehow, if that makes sense. Like, I know that it's been a very uncomfortable past couple weeks as far as some of the messages that have been written. And that was kind of my point, because I really wanted to agitate and see who would kind of take action against me. And it's been quite a few people. So what I'm trying to see now is what the village does with those people. Not necessarily in that they have to remove them or anything, but necessarily more like how we facilitate a conversation. Because I know that some of them may even be in here in this conversation. But what I want to understand now is how the village reacts to that sort of thing.
Well, I'm really sorry to hear some of these stories, Olivia, and your perspective on this is very helpful. We have not reached out to any of the other people because the ones that you're referring to, because in part we don't know who they are. Obviously, we don't even know if they're all residents. However, it is, we are all about creating dialogue and having people share experiences. And so, I'm sure I don't know how we can identify some of them, but I'm sure if we do, we would
And
like to
even,
invite them.
okay, well, I mean, even if we could, okay, so even if we can't identify them, like there are other ways that we can fight the racism, like within our North Shore. Like, for example, there's definitely a housing issue. Like there are a ton of like areas in the North Shore that don't have affordable housing. And a lot of these places were created because of segregation, because of redlining, because of, a lot of other racist policies. And the police budgets being what they are in these communities are basically like private security. So, we call them and we even also rename them. We go from calling them police to, public safety officers because we know what they do. Police, have this very militaristic and, dangerous look to them. So, to make it palatable, we call them community, safety or public safety in order to like kind of make this softer, palatable thing to the community, which also makes it harder to identify a police issue in these sorts of areas because a lot of people don't understand that there's also a police issue in these areas or that the police are even an issue at all. Is that making any sense? Because it kind of just goes into, being able to, not just identify racism in the North Shore, but also being able to deal with it. Like we have to start identifying these issues and just calling them what they are, if that's making sense.
Anybody from the forum have questions or comments?
Sure, I have a question. Give me the correct name. Is it Ivory?
Ivory?
Sorry, Reverend Gary, are you asking the name of Olivier?
Yeah. What is it? Olivia?
Olivier.
Olivier. Thank you
Yes.
for the correction. Sorry for pronouncing it correctly. Yes, I agree with you as it pertains to the North Shore as a whole. There are a lot of discrepancies as it relates to employment, housing, redlining, all of that. And it's part of the history of the North Shore, if I can say it like that. What's one of the messages you would like to share to the North Shore that you're hoping we can buy into? Meaning, how can we help share that same message to get buy-in to it? Let me ask you that way.
Sorry, can you say, the last part?
What is the one? to help educate the North Shore area? What's that one message? Because you say you did an experiment and you wrote different messages. I'm trying to hear what's the one message.
The one message that I guess I want everybody to understand is that there's a rebellion going on and that it's everywhere. Like every single problem that we think is not plaguing our community is literally what made the community. What I want to see done is to see one unanimous and very vocal, very loud message that Black lives do matter and that racism is something that will be fought actively by the village of Glencoe across the North Shore. And this is something that I don't want to just see in Glencoe. Like I want to see it like in every town, because right now Chicago it's a very segregated city. I mean, we look at the South Side and we look at the North Side and we look at some of these other like less impoverished neighborhoods and we see clearly what happened. And we see that, you know, the Black community was essentially just bombed out. I mean, it was defunded. The schools are still shutting down. Now they're trying to reopen, you know, what schools are left. And now Black kids will be going to school and be getting infected. Well, I think actually they just changed that because of the Chicago Teachers Union. But we're also, like even with schools shutting down, we're still seeing like a major education gap. You know, not everybody has access to internet. Not everybody has access to the resources that they can do remote learning from. Not everybody has access to food. And what I want to see is the North Shore actively getting up to let Chicago and its government know that what they're doing is not okay, and that we can still pick up and partner with different parts of Chicago that are impoverished and help fix them up, you know, help bring equity to, you know, to these areas, help fight against some of the policies that are going on. I mean, if we've got an entire, it's like Asada said, you know, if we got one good block and then you've got another good block, now we've got two good blocks, right? But we've got a whole bunch of bad blocks right now. And now we've got an entire strip of really good blocks. So if we pool our resources, we can take down some of these bad blocks and help build them into better blocks. And when I say block, I mean like blocks in the neighborhood. I mean, look at Glencoe, look at Highland Park, look at Deerfield, look at Northfield. Like we can really pool some resources together and rebuild some of these areas, you know, transform some of these lives, you know, without gentrifying. And that's another problem, is gentrification in these areas. And now it's another form of violence. And where will Black people go then? Because the South Side is kind of, you know, the last stop before Indiana. Well, there's like a lot of land, but what I want to see is different parts of the North Shore like getting together to tackle this problem.
I would love to have I don't think our forum time-wise have time to really dive deep into some of this dialogue. I would love to just sit down and further do a deep dive conversation with you to see how we can help educate each other on how to do some of these things to start the process.
Yeah, no, I would definitely love to partner as well. Because there are some organizations that I know that would really, or that have been actually super active in the area, not just, you know, in downtown Chicago, but in the North Shore as well. And I've been working with some of them and trying to get them to sort of partner with some of these other governments up here so that we can start tackling some of these bigger issues, you know, some of these issues that, you know, we kind of try and shy away from while we're in this sort of bubble. Ideally, I would really like to see, I would really love to meet with you, by the way. But I would really ideally like to see, you know, all of these governments, you know, kind of coming together and saying, okay, we need to meet and see what we can do for some of these impoverished areas. how we can tackle and curb police brutality in our areas, which we can do by defunding the police and also removing police from our schools. I mean, we have Black kids that go to New Trier, and I'm sure that, you know, some of the Glencoe kids go to New Trier as well. But like adding more police to schools and stuff like that, or even areas, puts Black people in danger, in like perpetual danger. And we've also seen that as a trend across the United States for the past 8-9 years.
You know, in response to your comment about police and schools, were you aware that several years ago a resident of Glencoe wanted to fund the placing of a public safety officer at Central School? And depending upon how that went, there might be public safety officers in the other schools in Glencoe. I was part of a committee that opposed that. The public schools had a referendum, non-binding, but a referendum asking the community if they wish to see an armed public safety officer at Central School. The vote was 80% against. I bring that up only that it's very important for the mission of the forum, as well as what you're talking about, that we form coalitions that are based on facts and do not paint with a broad brush. So my feeling is that when I hear white people, I would amend that and say some white people. I think when we hear that, it evokes a defensive reaction that is not helpful to the mission of the forum, or for, if you want to call it, other progressive movements. Glencoe and the North Shore vote overwhelmingly Democratic. We have to tailor the message to the facts on the ground and not speak in generalities. You know, the clergy on the North Shore were very, very prominent in the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s. That's a real proud part of North Shore history. Are there parts that are anything but proud? Yes, indeed. But we need to build coalitions. Saying defund the police is like giving anti-progressive elements in our society a really strong talking point. You got to be real. We have to look at facts, my friend. We really do. And work to build coalitions. This forum was started in the late 90s, and it's a straightforward civil rights mission. It's inclusive.
So, okay, so to speak to that, I get what you're saying. However, it also is going back to palatability. So when I say white people, I'm speaking in general. So like, and I know that the generalities can be bad because yes, there are definitely white people who will be a part of this movement. There are definitely white people who are, you know, willing to, relinquish their privileges, to fight, against racism. But we also have to remember that in general, the white people of this nation are either indifferent or really don't want to give up those rights. When white people make up 76% of the country and most of the policies are created and funded by white people, and we have like these inequalities, and most of white people are not fighting back against it and have something to say about the way that Black people fight, such as burning or shooting or fighting back, then those same white people were never really for the revolution or the movement. Because I mean, for 450 years, you've got people that were being lynched. By the way, there were between 8 and 10 lynchings within the past 2 months. And this is exactly like Jim Crow. This is exactly like Selma. Like, people are getting hung up in trees. People are getting shot. People are being gassed. People are on the street being met with riot gear, while white supremacists hold rallies with weapons and are free and are not being met with, you know, that same brutality. I mean, look who was voted in by, like, you know, like 56% of the white population. So it's like, you know, I get it. Yes, there are. But also, I also want to speak to the whole Democrats thing. So Democrats are also not really great for, you know, Black people. They've never really been for us. I mean, we ask for police to be defunded. They go and say police reform. But we already know for a fact that police reform doesn't work. We know that you can't change a hammer and make it, you know, something that'll, you know, protect the community when the community is a whole bunch of nails. You know, we've effectively militarized and turned these people into assassins, you know, government agents. Yeah, I get, like, how you feel about it, but at the same time, that actually goes into what's called white fragility. Like, there are a lot of things for the terms that you actually, for the things that you spoke on. So I guess I get it, but there are coalitions. There are people who understand that, you know, it's not, you know, all white people, and there are definitely white people who understand that, but they also understand the nuances behind these things. So when I say white people, of course I'm not speaking about all white people, but in general, the behavior of white people is largely, we approve of racism, and we're not really going to do much to change it unless it's palatable to us, which, for example, would be not burning anything and asking and voting, when all of these things are also not granted to us. We can't ask, we can't vote. I mean, there's a reason why felons are not given the right to vote, because they'd never vote Democrat or Republican. I mean, look at how many people are in jail today and how many of them are Black, and why a lot of these policies are built around our bodies. So we know what the response is, and we get it. Like, there will definitely be people who support us, but we're also not going to, you know, make it, we're not going to center white feelings around this. And that's what it would be, is like, you know, and if you want to make a change, you have to understand what's being said. You have to understand the terms being used. You have to understand the context. So I get how it sounds, you know, but at the same time, at the end of the day, it's still centering white people, when the conversation today and for the past 10 years has been centered around Black lives, and that's what we're still trying to do. So I you know, I get what it sounds like, but at the same time, and also when it comes to defunding the police, we have to be, I get what the opposition is going to think and what they're going to say, but also we have to remember that there isn't going to be much talking left. We don't really have much time for that. You know, we're headed towards a really big explosion. I mean, what's been happening in the past 2 months is nothing compared to what's going to come. I mean, we have an election that may or may not happen this November. And we have to remember that Black people have never lashed out the way. I mean, we have, but not in the same way that we did. I mean, we've been protesting for a good 2 months. And the longest protest, I believe, was during the Civil Rights Movement. It was called the Red Summer or something like that. We may even go straight through winter if you know, the elections don't pan out. I mean, of course, they weren't going to pan out anyway, so there may, you know, be another, you know, destructive dash throughout a month. But we also have to be real about where we are with this. I think that when we talk about, you know, saying some and this, like, we're very much in the juvenile stage of, you know, what we need to understand. Like, we're a little past that. Like, we understand that there are some, you know, white allies and whatnot, but also we understand that some of our white allies who are a little more fragile tend to be more detrimental than they tend to be helpful. And it's important that those same people are educating themselves and understanding why we're saying the things we say and why it is a general statement, because in general, we've seen how white people react when it is time for us to say, we're not going to do this shit anymore. You know, it's always been, oh, well, if this is how you feel about it, then I'm no longer supporting you, because it doesn't cater to their feelings. or how they feel, or you know, because a lot of people are just uncomfortable. And the whole point of this is to make people uncomfortable. Like, we can't keep, you know, following this line of, I mean, I get that we have to drop, you know, little bits and pieces for, you know, the opposition or people who may be indifferent or something, but there still needs to be a level of discomfort that people need to either acknowledge or just get over, because this is what we're dealing with every single day of our lives. I mean, I wasn't comfortable when I was in Glencoe the entire time shocking, but I remained silent for a reason, because I knew that I'd get the police called on me, you know, just for talking. I didn't say anything back unless spoken to, but that was kind of the point. And people got uncomfortable to the point where they had to call state armed troops on me. I had to create a level of discomfort that was so minimal, like so minimal, and these people got uncomfortable. So it's like, when I have to, you know, tailor myself around, you know, how everybody else feels, or when Black people have to, you know, tailor themselves around how everybody else feels, then we're not really paying attention to, you know, how Black people feel at all. It's like, if you feel uncomfortable and you feel upset, guess what? We're headed in the right direction. So I get what you're saying.
So can you talk a little bit about, in Glencoe, your experience when you were talking, and you said that some people did call the police. However, can you talk about that experience specific to Glencoe?
So first couple days that I was out there, actually the first day I was out there, I had an officer come up to me and say, hey, we see that you're just chalking. We're not really going to bother you too much. And then they kind of just, you know, left and went on their way. So I just thought nothing of it. But then that same officer came back and had said that I was being accused of writing violent messages, to which I was not. And you could probably see everything that I wrote. I even have pictures of them. So there's, like, you know, you can see that there's nothing violent. So when I say that, you know, I even wrote a very specific one that I was really trying to get Glencoe to understand, was that Glencoe Police Department are not a death squad. They're not your personal death squad, and you shouldn't treat them that way. And the reason why I said that was because, well, for example, that lady had said that, you know, I was writing violent messages in which she was probably hoping she would get some kind of negative reaction in which I would get hurt, arrested, or, you know, murdered. There was also an incident where this man had accused me of assaulting him while I was chalking. And I had gotten the full video because I didn't want, I didn't want to be shot, really. Because, you know, when you hear that a Black person is assaulting, like, you know, somebody, you know, in that kind of town, you're going to get quite the reaction from the police. And that is something that I couldn't let slip by. So I had to walk with that guy and videotape him to show that I didn't touch him or have any plans to touch him. And this man walked in, he was right in front of the Glencoe Police Department, you know, Village Hall. You know, he whistled at this Black man that was, I guess he must have worked there. He had claimed that was his friend, but didn't even know his name. Then he walked, and I followed him into the police department. And then the first thing he said was, "This man is assaulting me," to which I was not. And I made no plans to. And I guess he was just really, I mean, what I'm really trying to identify is the violence and danger that a lot of these civilians are trying to bring, and what Glencoe needs to respond in a way that says that police are not to be used as like private security, which is how they're acting and what they were really built for a neighborhood meant for white people. You know, some of these residents are practicing exactly what these neighborhoods are built for. So now we're seeing these violent reactions. Now we're seeing, you know, people attempting to assassinate a Black person in broad daylight. And had these police been any more violent than, like they were in the past 10 years with me, then I very much could have been a hashtag and Glencoe would have been on the map right now. And we have to understand just how dangerous those things are, because people will die someday. And it could be very soon that happens.
However, how did our public safety respond to you?
So they took my statement down. They were pretty, I guess, calm is what you could say. But there was a little bit of gaslighting. There was an attempt to, say that, oh no, it was just a misunderstanding. But, as somebody who's lived up here and lived in this kind of environment, I know these, the type of people that live around here. I know that it wasn't some sort of misunderstanding. I mean, it was hard as hell to mistake. Like, a white man walks into a police station, says, this black person is assaulting me while they're not. Or when a white woman is filming a black person and then, proceeds to, call the police on this person for chalking, which is not legal, or graffiti. They're making an attempt to harm and kill. So with that of the officers, had they been anybody else, I really could have been facing an execution. And that's very scary. And for the police to kind of just keep patrolling and patrolling and patrolling, like, I know how to de-escalate myself. Like, I've been in the military, I've served, I know how to bring things, down. It's very disheartening. And as somebody with PTSD, like very bad PTSD, always looking at, seeing a police car or a uniform or something like that, it really brings my blood pressure up, and now I'm in fight or flight mode, and that's just causing me distress. I know, I'll be there in a few minutes. Oh, okay, cool. Thank you. I'll be there in a few minutes. Right. Yeah. Okay, guys. Unfortunately, I gotta go, but I would love to talk more in the future.
Yes, thank you, Olivia, for sharing. We obviously have a lot of education on our part in the community, so your experiences, thoughts have helped. We'll be in touch. I will get you in touch with Reverend Gary as well, so you can
Absolutely
have a conversation. And he's a wonderful man, newly married man. You will enjoy your conversation with him. We want to hear more, get more ideas, and we'll continue our dialogue. This is not a one and done meeting. We have every forum meeting. You're welcome to join us, listen in, or speak. So you know how we're progressing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I don't know if we don't have a lot of time. We have identified some of, obviously it's not, I don't know if it was a direct point at our public safety, more so I think more of the citizens and how they were behaving and how they were calling the police and how they felt unsafe. So I think education, dialogue, it just comes back to everything we've talked about. Which leads me actually into, our organizations that we wanted to work with. We talked about this in our last meeting, right? I mean, we want to be the liaison and start working with our organizations within our communities who have more outreach to other people that, we don't have directly. And that way, working with them, have whatever events they have planned, work just on spreading the awareness and understanding. I know I heard from some of you on some of those organizations, and thank you for being out there and volunteering to put your names. Some of your names I just volunteered to put on my own, aka Reverend Gary. Sorry about that, but if you do feel that your name shouldn't be there, let me know.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I do believe that we have to do some educational piece on both ends. The young man that shared tonight talked about education. Bob came back and shared some historical facts that maybe some of us did not even know about, and or knew or forgot about. And so I think we need to take some of these bits and pieces, gather the historical information, and see where we are today, and share it among the residents of Glencoe, so there's a common message and understanding about a particular situation that has been talked about on tonight.
And by, oh, excuse me, Reverend, please go ahead, Reverend.
No, I was just simply saying that's some information that probably needs to be shared, because many residents may not know that historical background, and we don't know how to measure from that time to the present, so we might continue to move forward or move the needle, as we would say. So that's all I wanted to share.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to Barbara Ollinger, the Glencoe Historical Society, and she's begun to look in the files for issues relating to civil rights in Glencoe and the North Shore. And she offered to be very, very helpful to what we're trying to do. So we will be able to continue to cooperate, I'm sure, with her.
Excellent.
Because I think the Reverend is absolutely correct. I think very few people understand history. You know, it's important to know what happened. It's right next to us. It's not in the distant past. The issues that we're facing, this country has grappled with since its founding. And it's important to know that. It's also important to speak, I think, as specifically as possible, which is why I made the comment about white people. Speaking as a Jew, I would never speak about Gentiles. Are there elements of that community that have not shown good faith in the Jewish community? Yeah, but you have to deal with specifics, with individuals, and talking about a group closes down conversations, I believe. And I want to be very, very clear. If I were the father of an African-American son, I'd be scared every time he left the house, and I mean that. I grew up in Chicago. When I went to the University of Illinois at Chicago, I worked my way through driving a taxi cab at night. That was like getting a master's degree in criminology. I'm not naive about what goes on, but we need to be as inclusive and coalition building as possible in order to effectively deal with these very, very real problems. There are some angry people out there. As I shared with you the other day, I was at the corner of Park and Vernon, and there was an older man who was very, very angry about chalking that was being done by, I was told, 2 Glencoe residents, one who had just graduated New Trier and the other who was either a junior or a sophomore. They behaved themselves very, very well, but he was very angry, and I was concerned for their safety. But that kind of behavior shuts down any possibility of a solution. And we have to build coalitions, and that's educating people and coming together to deal with this.
So what, maybe one of the things we can discuss here is what do we want to accomplish when we're talking to our organizations, even, you know, the ones that we have on the list that I shared, that Sharon shared with everyone. I mean, like, it would be good to have that clear, you know, idea on, you know, just from what we are hearing from residents or from visitors, from, you know, our you know, people like Olivia. How do we want to work with like these organizations? What do we want to see? What do we want to see with moving forward with the forum, the organizations, our community? Any ideas?
I had the opportunity to speak with Reverend Scott Himmel yesterday, and I thought he had a really wonderful suggestion. He shared that, you know, he's hearing about these different efforts that are going on within the community and on the North Shore. And would it be something that we could provide like a central location of these events, perhaps a calendar, where we can, not only all of us on the forum participate or attend some of these events, but make it available to the community. So I thought that was a really interesting idea. He was referencing the Clergy Association panel that's coming up in August, and then he also spoke of the Rotary Club is thinking of doing something similar. So those two events, I think, I don't know that the Rotary Club has settled on a date, but I think the Clergy Association has. So I thought that was a really interesting idea, if we could be providing some type of calendar perhaps to the residents.
Mm-hmm.
By way of background, that's not too dissimilar. And Maureen, that's I think a great suggestion, and that we have a bit of experience with on a very different topic last year, the sesquicentennial 150th birthday of the village, where the village partnered with different organizations that each did things to observe or mark the occasion throughout the year of the 150th, and that those organizations hosted, facilitated, sponsored, whether it was events from the Historical Society or the Park District or other organizations. So that concept is one that we do have some experience with. So to the extent that the forum would like to stay engaged with other organizations, I think that's a very workable kind of concept.
I think that's a good idea too. To gather all the information, all the events surrounding this issue, and have there be like a catalog of how people can get involved. The thing that, when Dipti, your question about what do we want to talk to these organizations about, what comes to mind for me, you know, depends on the organization and how much contact, you know, whether their organization is insular and they just deal with each other. But I think most of the organizations we're talking to have community outreach, you know, for some, you know, they provide a service or they interact with the community. And my questions for them would be, you know, have you addressed the issue of racial inequality? Have you addressed it with your employees? Do you have policies regarding it? Do you provide programming to the community? Have you noticed things that you've talked about changing or trying to change, and how would you change them? You know, just to get a feel of what everybody else out there is doing about it. And I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record. I have a lot of interest in talking to people that are experienced in educating, like somebody could tell me what their policies are, and they might sound like good policies. But I don't know if maybe there's better policies out there, or if they've been tried and failed in other areas. And that's why I continue to want to get in touch with some sort of an expert on how does a community approach these issues and what can they look for. I'm still moved by an article I read a few weeks ago, and I can't remember where I read it, but a national activist in this issue said, you know, we want you to do more than hear our stories. We want you to stand with us and fight. And so I stand ready to do that, but I don't know how to fight. I don't know what that fight looks like, and I don't know what words to use and what tools to gather for that fight. And that's why I'm searching for this information, and I'm doing the best I can on my own. But I would love, since we have, you know, a larger pool and the resources of the village, and I know that I keep bringing up Reverend Gary's friend from Evanston, Reverend Neighbors, I think his name is, who is the head of the local chapter of the NAACP, may be able to give us a little guidance on what to look for and what to hope for, and maybe steer us in a direction that would be useful. But that's just my personal thought.
Another aspect along those lines, Margot, is that we are working, I think this has been mentioned before, but we're working on finalizing some training that we intend to continue providing to our staff that has been, that got underway a couple of years ago in the public safety department, but we want to roll out to the entire organization, and probably would have already, but for COVID kind of changing our trajectory this year. But also to provide similar awareness training, awareness building training for both this group as well as the village board together, hopefully in the next couple of months, and to find a 4-hour block of time for both groups at the same time to really kind of set a level playing field and really kind of get the ball rolling together along those lines. And I think that's another means of speaking to your point, which is to hopefully help the forum to find its own footing and its own process for not only just starting community dialogue, but bringing that dialogue along. And perhaps it leads to recommendations to the village board, or if not full out recommendations, at least sharing of information with Trustee Rubin on the forum as a real conduit between the two groups, only adding to that ability. So I do think there's some real value in helping all of you and the staff that's going to support this group effort by bringing in some subject matter experts who can really help to formulate the direction for the groups.
I see that you know, of course, our staff and our organizations, I mean, you're looking at, you know, training for them. What really struck me with what Olivier was talking about was the fear. I felt the fear that he has, that he sees in the residents, that they so easily pick up the phone and call the police. I mean, what instigates that fear, right? You see a person of color doing, you know, a task that obviously is different for the residents here, such as chalking. However, if he is keeping to himself, what is it that instigates? The first thing that people think of is, oh, let me call the cops on you. You know, that struck me as something that, yeah, why do people think like that? And how can we help change that, where we make our residents also feel comfortable, safe, that anybody could be walking in our town, anybody could be driving through or living here, going to restaurants, sitting or not, or, you know, chalking. However, feel the safety and why do you feel like you need to call the cops right away? You know, that is kind of, I think, a very important point that he brought up. And the feeling that he has for all these years of his life, obviously, not just now, but clearly being evident in his few days in Glencoe.
And Dipti, I think that's a really excellent point. And I think to elaborate a bit more, I think there's, in terms of training the forum, or providing training for the forum, I don't think it's intended to stop there. I think it's a bit of a train the trainer type of a mindset. And to provide this group with perhaps a foundational perspective on bias and why people may leap to that point. Because I think that it's a critical component of the overall community dialogue. I think Bob's point before about, you know, words have great meaning, and the way that we generalize, all of us generalize, you know, knowingly or unknowingly sometimes, that's a component of the discussion with respect to understanding bias and understanding those things that are to some degree hardwired in many of our brains for many, many years and generations before us. And so I think it leads, the conversation is not intended to be kind of a check the box and be done with it, but more so, how do we create a foundation for this group really to take in some of what we're going to hear, and what we heard from Olivier today, I think is a really good introduction to some of the comments that we may hear from others in the community or from outside the community. And how do we then understand what may lead somebody to do just what you were discussing? And I think obviously there's multifacets that relate back to that, but it's I think a good opportunity for us to look at that, and that point exactly is, you know, what leads individuals to think a certain way, and how do we start to unpackage that and perhaps change thinking?
We've had at work, we've had a very large inclusion summit, is what we call it. Happens once a year. And we invite professionals who, this is their job, really, inclusion, talking about inclusion, training in some way, if you want to call it training, you know, breaking out in groups, doing small activities, understanding people's point of views, and then checking yourself often because of those biases or unconscious biases that you may have. And that's kind of where I learned the word allyship, because I think like it is so important that we do have that sort of an understanding. I think what I struggle with is how do we take that forward to our community? I know we thought that this would be a great place and have our forum meetings, but you know, you heard today, Phil, how do we get people to attend? How do we have more people come here? How, when we're trying to talk about this, I mean, you know, our village president in his letter just last week was, you know, asking people to attend our forum meetings, and you know, we have to find a way to reaching out to people. But I also feel like casual conversations never hurt anybody. If you see somebody, you see neighbors, talk about it, you know. Hey, what do you feel when you saw a Black person downtown? What was your first thought? Did you want to call the cops? Like, why would you want to call the cops? Like, you know, it's okay to just have those very one-off but very casual conversations, because that's, I feel like, as a forum, also part of what we should be doing is more out there one-on-ones with our community, people we know, even, you know. You'll be surprised what you hear.
You know, I think Dipti, that's again, great comments. And the only thing I would elaborate on with respect to that is I think the work of the forum, no doubt, is going to be more than these meetings. These meetings, I think, to some degree will evolve actually probably into more of a reporting out of the work that's being done. The outreach to the community organizations is a structural component. You know, Maureen, you had the chance to talk with Reverend Himmel today. I've talked with him a couple of times too. The concept of a community discussion that the Rotary Club wants to facilitate and work through. that's something that I see as the natural outgrowths of the discussions that are happening right now. And the forum will help to facilitate those. To your point, and we struggle with this at every level of government, but you know, at the local level, oftentimes people will only engage when they're upset about something. It's difficult to get people to engage just on a regular basis. What we've seen in the pandemic and kind of a move to virtual meetings is actually a heightened sense of engagement, at least even if it's passive engagement of listening in on a meeting that may be on YouTube or something like that. How do we continue to move through and engage the community in those casual discussions, and perhaps a more structured one in the future too, or set of discussions? I think the opportunities are somewhat limitless from the perspective of what the forum can do. We have wonderful community partners that I think want to help with that, be they Writers Theater or Family Service. And you guys have the chance to kind of say, all right, we're going to help to facilitate those discussions. We're gonna work to bring people together to find you know, how these discussions can take place. And they're going to happen in a lot of different places that aren't just this meeting. I think these meetings, as I said, will really evolve perhaps more into reports from individual members of the forum on the work that they've been doing in the subcommittee or among their faith community or among social or civic groups that they're parts of or are working with. So I think these are a series of steps, and you're really in your formative years in that sense. Somebody said that, I think it was Olivier, relative to the movement, but this really is kind of the formative time to start putting some of that together.
You know, to make a couple of points. One, why don't we reach out immediately to community organizations? I think foremost among them would be churches and synagogues, and ask to be invited to their Zoom meetings. They're having Zoom meetings to explain the purpose of the forum, because clearly not many people know what we're doing. So why not we, call them up and see if, I'm sure they'll extend an invitation. That we can do right away. Two, regarding the chalking, I think a lot of people were reacting to what they thought was an illegal incident, that it was illegal to chalk on the sidewalks of downtown Glencoe. And one of the best responses I saw to that was by a public safety officer. She explained to two women she was talking with in front of Hometown that there was nothing illegal about it, that they were free to grab a piece of chalk and chalk their own message. And if they had other concerns about it, she urged them to contact the president of the village board. I thought she handled it exceptionally well. The third thing I'd like to say is, I think we need to pay more attention to what we can do to encourage more hits. And I've said this before, on village websites. I might be dead wrong about this, but when I go on to, when I see a posting by the village or the park district, it appears that there are very few hits. Now, I could be dead wrong about that. I hope I am wrong about that. But if I'm right, how can we encourage more hits? How can we get the message of the forum as well as other arms of the village? How can we increase the hits on their messages? I see it as a problem. I just don't see many people responding. Again, please tell me if I'm wrong, but there are ways to increase hits. And I would love to see us do them all. Thank you.
Bob. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bob.
No, I'm done.
You're pointing to, I think you're making a lot of really excellent points that engagement with information that we produce is important. And you're pointing to one of the ongoing areas of focus and challenges, frankly, I think, in local government communications, which is how to encourage additional engagement. And I know you and I have talked separately about that, but for the good of the group, we do track engagement on our social media. That's not only people who may like something or share something, but even just the number of people who see that post. What that doesn't tell us is how much time they spend engaging with it. Did they just simply scroll past it, or do they take the time to read it? With social media platforms changing fairly rapidly and shifting in popularity, that's something that we try to keep current with. And what we found is that there are different platforms that are popular within the community. For example, Nextdoor is an incredibly popular platform. So we've routinized use of Nextdoor, which may or may not show the same level of engagement as, say, Facebook or Twitter, but we use all of them in efforts to try to reach people in a way that's comfortable and convenient for people, along with our other communication tools. But you're absolutely right. And one of the things that we do know with regards to communication is more frequent messaging helps. We routinize daily posts on our social media, in part because of the pandemic, but it's been a good opportunity for us to build that as a more significant part of our daily routines. What once was biweekly e-news has migrated to a more weekly format now. So we do try to use different tools to meet people in whatever fashion they'd like to. You sharing things is helpful too, because that reaches a broader audience. Someone is only going to see our post on, say, the Village's Facebook if they're following the Village, or if they happen to go to our Facebook page, even if they don't subscribe to Facebook. But when someone shares our content, then that reaches a broader audience. That's how things go viral on social media. So, I know, Bob, you're a wonderful follower of the Villages on Facebook, and that helps.
Well, one of the things also to add to that, Sharon, is yes, we have our presence out there. However, the data that is being shared is not easy to get to. So, I had someone ask, how do I get to this meeting? There's no link. There's no link. You got to go, you got to click, you got to click, you got to click, you got to go to the agenda, you got to click, then you find the meeting link. So I don't know if we can make things easily accessible. So it's like the important things are right there, because we lose probably 50% of the audience in the first click, and then another percentage in the second click, and by the time it actually comes to the data, that's like that much of who we could have got in our first click. So I don't know, something to think about.
No, you guys are pointing to the great struggle of public information, which is you never get it right. And the reality is what's easy for one is difficult for another. And so, I think your points are all excellent, and they underscore the struggles that we've had with engagement. We have probably tripled the number of followers on all of our social media platforms in the last 2 years. We're seeing more traffic than we've probably ever seen since the pandemic started. And to Sharon's point, some of that is because I think we're a trustworthy news source and people are looking for trustworthy information. And that being said, our website is now 3.5 years old, which might as well have been crafted with chisels and tablets of stone in the world of websites. But we have struggled a bit with making sure that information is in a place that people know how to find it, that it's keyword accessible. Those are all aspects of what we know we have to do better with. The only thing I'd add to Sharon's point is that I think we know that we have to share information in a multitude of different ways for people to see it. And yet we can't be sitting next to them and asking them to actually click on the information. And that's the biggest struggle in public information, in the public information world, is to actually get people to consume what you've created. And Bob, I love the fact that I see your likes and your comments on our messaging, because I know that means somebody's reading it, and I know that you're talking about it with your friends and with your acquaintances. What we are hopeful is to what Sharon said, is share it away. Please share it. Some of you aren't on social media, and that's okay. But use our other tools. If you're getting our e-news blasts, share that with your friends too via email, and encourage them to participate, because we're going to get the info out there too.
I wonder if there is a way to just, sorry, Margot, just one point I wanted to make is, when we say Community Relations Forum meeting this Wednesday, right? I mean, it shows up right there. It showed up on my Nextdoor today, you know. Right there, I should be able to click to join, click here.
Well, you can click and it takes you right to the agenda. It should take you right to the agenda, which is where you're hitting the Zoom, action. You know, you guys, Dipti, you're coming into a time frame that is extreme luxury from the standpoint of public engagement.
Yeah.
Up until March, you know, these meetings, we couldn't have these meetings in this way. State law had to change to accommodate virtual meetings like this. And when you are relying upon people to actually get in their cars and drive to a public meeting location, you get even less public engagement. And so I think what we have to figure out is, when we start to revert back to in-person meetings, how do we make sure we still are providing these kinds of opportunities? And that's something that we know we have to do overall throughout all of the village's operations, is to continue to keep people participating.
Zoom stock is going to be around, because Zoom's going to be around for a long time.
I'm just saying, when we go back to in-person meetings, we know we're going to have to make sure that there's an electronic participation.
Right.
Option, yeah.
That never happened before March, for this group at least.
Right. Can I ask if something's a possibility? When we get our notice or invitation to the next meeting, can it come with a notice that we can then forward to our, like today I had lunch with a neighbor, and she, you know, was like, oh, that sounds really cool. And I'm like, you should come to the meeting. I don't know how you get there. Try and find it online. Like, so if we could get sort of an invitation that we could then forward to our organizations, as Bob mentioned, our churches and synagogues, our other volunteer organizations, boards that we're on, book clubs we're in, neighbor groups, we may be able to increase interest. And I've mentioned it before, the sort of the rub is that I don't.
Oh, oops.
Oh, you
We
froze.
lost your voice.
Margot lost her. Yeah.
The downside of virtual meetings.
Well, it depends what they're saying.
Yeah, sometimes it's a good thing, right?
While Margot's hopefully unfreezing, one thing.
Want to. Oh, I'm back.
Oh, you're back.
You're back now.
Usually there's a whole shutdown process and yay. Okay, but it might go away soon. So yeah, if we could have that to forward, and then also be mindful that, you know, maybe if we take a look at the agenda or know what we're going to be talking about, make sure that there's some substance that would, you know, engage our visitors, so that we can keep them engaged. Because I've like I've mentioned before, my experience on the Human Relations Forum is we go in with a bang, we get everybody interested, and then it dwindles down to very little interest. And I don't want to see that happen. And then the other thing, is it possible to post notices? Can we put up a flyer in Starbucks? Can we put them up where we used to put up the meeting with, you know, coffee with the trustees type things, particularly if we have a really engaging speaker, or, you know, comments being made. Also being mindful, if the Writers Theater people do decide they want to talk to us, maybe they don't want a larger crowd, so maybe we don't invite as you know, go as all out for that, just kind of off the top of my head.
Yeah. Real quick, Margot, I'll say that when I send your meeting materials, the link that I share is one that you can absolutely share with anyone you like. There's nothing about that link that's unique to you. So that you feel free to take that link. If there's something that's more kind of just for the forum, like reminding you if you got the Zoom invite, things like that, you know, don't forward a whole email, but the link, certainly feel free to copy and paste that, because that's just driving straight to our website.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
And that follows with instructions on how to get into the meeting.
The first page of the agenda has the instructions of how to log in. It just
that's what that first page says.
does.
There's live links on that front page, so it takes straight to the Zoom.
Oh no!
You know what, Margot, to your point, I think it was the last meeting when Reverend Gary, we were talking about having dialogue with the chalkers, and I think Reverend Gary said to all of us, let's remember that everyone has a story. And I had the opportunity to speak to Olivier at great length and kind of hear his story. And my regret tonight was that you know, he kind of hopped on. I think we were not sure if he was going to join us or not. And he had quite a story to tell. And that might be of interest to the village. Like, this was the guy that was downtown chalking, and let us tell you that he attended North Shore Country Day for grade school. He went to Highland Park High School for high school. He's a vet. You know, there's a lot to this young man. And tonight I regret that, you know, we didn't get to hear more of that. He's a very interesting young man. Obviously, he's got a lot of enthusiasm and a very large agenda, but he had a story to tell. And I don't know if that would be something that would draw people in, but it really helped me frame my conversation with him.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Maureen.
Well, and then this is just something I wrote down. It was something that we discussed previously, and I can't remember what the connection is, but I wanted to share with you that when my children were little and being an interracial family, they were often asked many, many questions. And often, instead of coming to my husband or I, they would go directly to our kids. And they were often left with this quandary of, you know, we wanted them to be polite, but at the same time, some of the questions were very inappropriate. And we kind of taught them this trick of when people approached them and they were uncomfortable, we told them to say, "Why do you ask?" And I would tell you that 9 times out of 10, the person doing the asking, usually an adult, would do this thing like, oh my gosh, why did I ask that? And it kind of caught them to stop and think, you know, why am I asking this question? So that gives me hope. I still use that as an adult. I still use that in my job. And I think if we as a forum kind of implemented that in a way, I think we could make a lot of headway.
And I just wanted to add to what you said earlier about Olivier and his message. You know, obviously he's welcome to come again and share more. However, I also feel like this is an opportunity for us to take his message and share with the organizations we will talk to. You know, I think we should, you know, and then see if they have ideas on how they can take that forward and share that, or if they want to create a panel discussion around that. You know, if they want to invite more Oliviers in the world to be part of their discussions. So I feel like this is a good opportunity for us to take forward, whereas we are going to start talking to the various entities in our village. And Gary has been so quiet today. I cannot believe it. I just cannot believe it.
Most people do not complain about this. Of course, most people don't get to experience it either. You brought something up just now. I mean, I've been listening. It's been a very, very educational session, a very productive session, I think. But you brought something up just now, tying back to these organizations and who did we want from people on the forum to reach out to various organizations. And I was wondering if we wanted to have any sort of discussion. Margot had some excellent suggestions earlier in the call. I was taking some notes about things when we do reach out to these other organizations. So for example, Dipti, you and I talked about the fact that perhaps I would be the member of the forum, given my history, to talk to the folks over at District 35 or the village trustees. But whichever the organizations are and whomever is doing it, did we want to talk further about any particular approach or set of questions or points? Or do we want to work on that? Or do we just want to leave it to individuals to kind of go and start having those conversations and see where they lead more freeform? I think a little bit of guidance might help.
I mean, I think a little guidance is good. However, every organization is different in their role. So I do feel like keeping it a little less formal and little more, also more conversational, because then that leads to, because everyone has different ideas. However, what I think would be really cool is if we could come back and share our thoughts together based on what we are hearing from organizations, and then also take that as a potential thought to share with the ones we're working with, to say, hey, did you know that organization ABC is planning on an event like this, or they talked about this, so that we're now cross-sharing so much information. There is a letter that Sharon has drafted, kindly, thank you, that we could have as an introduction that we can provide to the organization, so that as we're reaching out, they know who the forum is, what our intent is. And it's very generic, actually, the letter. However, it gives enough information about our forum and how we want to partner with them. But that's, again, very generic. So if we're looking for like specific points, Gary, I mean, you're right. We should probably come up with at least a couple if we want to say, this is what we want to start with, and then let the conversation lead to where it needs to go.
I think that's important too. I've done some surveying of organizations for strategic planning of various organizations. And I found that if I have sort of talking points or a script even, when we gather back to discuss what we've learned, we have we've all asked similar, if not the same questions. So we're both taking the temperature of what we want to learn from these other people, and we're ferreting out new and different ideas. So it's both, do you have a policy? How do you enforce it? That kind of stuff. Like if we can find out that, most organizations in Glencoe don't have a policy, or every single one of them does have a policy, then, we have more consistency in, I don't know, it just helps me when I'm looking at organizations to have sort of an overall.
It's wrapped really good.
Why don't we divvy up the churches and other organizations in Glencoe, reach out to them tomorrow. We're not going to get, I mean, they're going to say yes, I'm sure, to inviting us to participate in a Zoom meeting. And in the interim, we could develop the talking points that I think will be very necessary for all of us to have. But we could get it going.
I think so. Even introducing, just introducing ourselves, reaching out, introducing ourselves, talking about Olivier coming on, giving his message. These are things that we could certainly start with.
Well, I wouldn't talk for him. What I'm saying is I don't think most people know that we exist. So I would love to see us go do a meeting and explain the purpose of the forum. Let's explain ourselves. If we can do, it's easy and we can get this moving. I don't want to speak for him.
Who's that from?
Ann Rossiter. You know what, I apologize, I have to jump off. I have another Zoom coming up. Excellent.
I was wondering if it was inside the glass.
Reverend Gary, you may want to mute.
I have another Zoom meeting on the same topic that I'd like to attend if there's nothing else I need to know.
Well, this is all we had to talk about that I had on the list. So if nobody else has anything else, we had a very productive 1 hour and 40 minutes today. And again, I'm very appreciative of everyone's time because this is everyone's personal time that you put in. So it's really appreciative that you spend that time. And I think we are moving forward. We have so much more that we are accomplishing. You know, much more than last meeting or the meeting before that. So if we can start talking to these organizations, we all know what we do, or I think we do. You know, I think we could start, and then Sharon and I can get together and see how we want to move on the formal format with the letter and stuff as well, if that's a requirement.
That'll be polished up within short order here.
Okay.
Waving goodbye.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else to talk about, then I have to talk about the other business, right? Is there any other business that a member of the forum would like to raise? Oh, actually.
And if there were any comments that came in terms of.
Oh, if there were any comments that came in. Yeah, why am I missing that? I'm not, sorry, I'm not seeing that in my little script. However, yes, are there any public comments on this topic? And then if you would like to make a comment, please press the raise hand button if you're joining the meeting online, or press *9 if you are by phone.
There are no hands raised and no comments have come in.
Then is there any other business that a member of the forum would like to raise? No? Then I just want to confirm that our next meeting is going to be the 19th of August at same time, 5 p.m. Were there any public comments submitted by email during this meeting?
Nope.
Okay, and may I please have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Sharon, can we have a roll call?
Chairperson Clark.
Yes.
Member Gary Rubin.
Yes.
Member Reverend Dwayne Gary.
Aye.
And Member Bob Young.
Yes.
I went around my screen clockwise. Sorry, I threw you off. I didn't go alphabetical on that one. We are adjourned.
Great, meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye-bye. Be well.